Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to ask folks to come and sit down if you're going to be a part of the town hall meeting. We are running slightly behind. It's 2:10, but that's okay. We'll just push it back to the other end. And I will give you guys a couple minutes to get settled before we begin. Okay, thank you. So first off, I'd like to welcome everyone to Masjid Al-Hidaya. It is so good to be here. I grew up actually down the street at 24 Lakeshore Drive, so I probably could have walked here had I still lived there, but a lot of good memories there. So glad that the community was able to come together and build this beautiful building, much needed. Personal story, um, Imam Jafar actually married my wife and I something like 18 years ago, 17? Yeah, 17. It's too long for me to remember, honestly, but 17 years ago, and we did it in the house that Masjid Al-Hidaya was in on 15th Ave, it's 15th Street in Troy, and now, look, it's so beautiful and so good to be here. So as I said, my name's Hassan Al-Minyawi. I'm going to be emceeing this event. And essentially, we are here today to talk about anti-Muslim hate and bias. So you might ask, who are you and why are you here? A few different things. I'm actually on the City School Board of Education for Albany, and I've been on that board for 6 years. I was on a board called the Albany Community Action Partnership, which dealt with early childhood education. I own a business in Albany selling books, and I also work for the New York State Thruway Authority. I'm a quality assurance manager there. So not to mention I'm Muslim, and my parents, who are Egyptian immigrants, came here something like 40-something years ago. They've been here triple the amount of time that they lived in Egypt. So we're all from somewhere, but we're all American. And that's really the point of this, that Muslims today, we make up 1% of the population in this country. And we're all well aware, if you look at the news, we make up an enormous amount of the coverage, and it's usually negative. So there's a disconnect there. So we're trying to get ahead of this, and by doing that, we're reaching out to our elected officials and our government representatives and trying to enlighten folks, because the bottom line is the more educated you are, the more you like Muslims, it turns out to be. So I just wanted to briefly introduce Senator Pat Fahey, Assemblywoman Gabriela Romero, Paula O'Brien Soler, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Division of Human Rights, and Jessica Bain, who is the Assistant Director of the Division of Human Rights. And we will get into, they will get a chance to fully introduce themselves and talk. But for now, I just want to keep going with this, because essentially there are going to be opportunities to ask questions to our elected officials and learn from our government representatives. So, if you look behind me on the TVs, there are essentially a slideshow that I'm going to go slowly through. But first, I'd like to introduce two organizations that are responsible for putting this together. There's AMAC and UMAA. So I'll start with introducing AMAC, if somebody would like to come up and have a conversation or have a discussion about what AMAC does.
Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, I have to tiptoe to get to this mic. But my name is Zarina Jalal. I am a lifetime member of this community like Hassan, and I am one of the co-founders of the Albany Muslim Advocacy Coalition. About 2 years ago, after weeks of scrolling through a genocide in live time, with tears in our eyes, a group of us came together, and we just wanted to talk about what more we could do. And our journey took us from there to Albany City Hall, where we, with the support of this community and our coalition partners, will successfully pass the first ceasefire resolution in the state of New York. That work in bringing that ceasefire resolution to pass made us realize that the Muslim voice was severely lacking from virtually every single conversation that was happening in this community. And so for the past 2 years, the Albany Muslim Advocacy Coalition has been working to amplify Muslim voices, promote understanding and empower our community, to drive positive change and create a more inclusive society. So this conversation today is an extension of that. And it's incredibly timely because as our brother Zahran Mamdani, his success has unleashed this tsunami of hate, and we want to thank you all for being here today, for being agents of change. May Allah allow us to use this conversation to build concrete steps towards safety, towards understanding, and towards better representation for our community. So thank you so much. And,
Thank you, Sister Zarina. Just make sure I got this right. There we go. I'd like to introduce Taimur, who is the president of UMAA, to give a few comments about what they do.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. My name is Taimur Naqi. I'm the president of Al-Hidaya Center, also the president of UMAA. UMAA was founded in 2023 in the immediate aftermath of October 7th and the genocide that ensued at the hands of the Israeli Defense Force and continues to this day. The genesis of UMAA was really an idea from Sheikh Jafar, who's the senior most imam for our community. And the thing that Sheikh Jafar emphasized was, as Muslims, particularly locally, we were always reacting instead of being proactive. So the idea was to found an organization that was masjid-based to speak to the concerns, the needs, the wants, and the desires of local Muslims, of American-born and raised Muslims, for issues that are near and dear to us, including, but not limited to, obviously, Gaza. Now, I would be remiss if I failed to recognize Pat Fahey and Gabriela Romero. They've always been available, made themselves available and accessible to the Muslim community. Gabriela Romero, in particular, spearheaded the ceasefire resolution at the Albany Common Council, which, if you think about that, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the prospect of something like that would be unheard of. But what that shows us is our voice matters, our concerns matter. When we show up and we show our politicians and our organizations across New York State that we are engaged, they're paying attention. And so that is why we are here. That is why we are happy to welcome our state representatives, senators, and personnel from the New York State Division of Human Rights. And we are looking forward to having a very candid, honest conversation with respect to anti-Muslim bias and discrimination. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for that introduction to both of your organizations. So, what is hate and bias? There is a difference, and just to highlight them, we have to understand that Bias is an expression of a hostility or hate due to one's protected class. That's a protected class is something enshrined in the Constitution that you cannot be targeted against, which is your race, your religion, your gender, your skin color. And report this data for policy purposes. So basically, when we report things, there's a difference between a bias and a hate crime. A hate crime is much more serious. It's threats, harassment, crimes motivated by hate towards a protected class. And it's important to understand the difference between these two so that when you experience it or when you see it, you can report it appropriately. So we're going to get into a section of community experiences, but I'm going to give you a little background about my experience as an American-born Muslim. I've experienced plenty of bias and things that I would say teeter on hate. So I'll give you an example. One of my first memories in school was being told by people in my class that I could not play with them because of my religion. They were doing something, in the sandbox, and it was like they were playing house or something, and I honestly remember it like it was yesterday. And they said, no, you can't play with us. And it was probably a group of 10 kids. You're a different religion than we are. And then I went and sulked to my Cambodian friend about it, he and I, we essentially said, yes, this is the way things are, and almost that we have to hide who we are. And I learned that lesson very young that, if you're an outward Muslim, you're gonna get, called names and you're gonna get targeted. So for many years, I did not feel like embracing my Islam or my Muslimhood was a smart thing to do. And obviously, that is not the right tactic. It's not the right strategy because look where we are. So, as somebody mentioned Mamdani earlier, he had a very powerful statement about operating in the shadows. And it's a part of my inner being that I can't. So that is why I do what I do on the school board and in public life. And I'm so happy that we're having this event because we need to come out in the light. We need to show everyone that we love peace, we are community minded, we are your neighbors, and we are not the enemy. So just to get into the community experiences, there's going to be 4 or 5 different folks who are going to come up and read essentially from people's experiences. They're not necessarily the folks who wrote the experience, but they're going to come up and represent them. So who's coming up first?
This is way too tall for me. So I'm reading this on behalf of a community member named Imran Siddiqui. He writes, "My name is Imran Siddiqui." Thank you. And I have had the pleasure of being part of the Domino's family for 40 years, with the last 25 years as a franchisee owner. Over the years, I've handled countless customer complaints, and my approach has typically involved apologizing and offering something free, which usually results in happy customers. However, I've noticed a troubling trend lately. It seems that people are increasingly full of anger, and unfortunately some have made racist comments. For the first time, I've encountered such comments in text messages, and I'll ask you all to take a look at the screen to see an excerpt of the text message thread he got. We tried to blur some words out of respect for the place of worship we're in, but I'm sure you can use your imagination and put together the pieces of what was said to him.
Okay, my experience is from an anonymous 8th grader. He says, on 9/11, even as we talked about the horrific acts that happened in 2001, many jokes were made of the day, and another student asked me, isn't it your day today? I was expected to brush it off as a joke, so I did. This is one both me and my oldest brother experienced in middle school. We were both called a terrorist due to our religious clothes and outward identification as a Muslim. Again, another joke we were expected to brush off as just playful teasing. A couple of my close friends retold the story of how when they were in the hallway walking to their lockers, someone whispered, they have a bomb, get down on the ground, due to their religious head covering. They had no idea what to do and just walked as fast as they could out of the hallway. In one of my brother's high school years, a hijabi got her hijab ripped off of her head. I have no other words for that, as just that pretty much sums up the horrible act. And then he says, as you can see, there are a lot of acts of microaggression that are experienced by us Muslims as a whole. These are only a small portion of racism based on religion that are experienced by students who go to schools in the capital region. And he thanks us for our time.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So I'm reading this on behalf of a concerned parent at Shenendehowa School District. And she writes, I had a troubling experience in the Shenendehowa School District that raises serious concerns about political bias in the classroom. During the genocide in Gaza, my son's critical inquiry class, this is 6th grade, was shown a highly political and inappropriate video. This is by Prager University, by the way. In this video, a Jewish speaker claimed that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic while also condemning anyone who criticizes the United States, implying that those who question or hold the United States government accountable are ungrateful and should remain silent because other countries have worse. This was not an educational content, it was propaganda promoting the idea that two specific governments, Israel and the US, are above criticism. I reached out to the teacher to address the clear violation. There was no response. I reached out to the principal about the clear violation. There was no response. However, one classroom, my son's, who she was not concerned with, was given some clarification. I stressed my concern that she was not concerned about her son, but for every student who was exposed to this propaganda. The double standard is alarming and unacceptable. Critical thinking cannot exist if certain governments are treated as sacred and above accountability. Students are taught to examine all systems of power, except apparently when it involves US foreign policy or Israel's actions. Shielding these topics from criticism while subtly shaming students who question them is indoctrination, not education. Sorry, I lost the...
I have one more anonymous testimony from another middle schooler, and I just want to pause there to really emphasize the fact that so many of these people felt uncomfortable identifying themselves or the schools or the institutions that they're complaining about, I think really speaks to exactly what we're saying right now, that there's this feeling that you either have to swallow it, and if you dare to speak it out loud, you better do it in a way that you're protecting yourself because there aren't systemic supports in place to protect you. So again, reading this on behalf of an anonymous youth. I was 11 years old, newly entering middle school, a time filled with new expectations, environments, and challenges. Transitioning into a new school is never easy, but doing so as a minority presents an entirely different experience. I found it difficult to fit in and feel accepted, even during small moments such as recess or lunch. Social circles seemed predefined, and seating arrangements reflected unspoken divisions. Although I often felt out of place, I made a conscious effort each day to remain confident and proud of who I was. Yet insecurity can arise even in those who strive to appear strong. Attending a predominantly Caucasian school, I encountered moments that tested my sense of identity and belonging. One day, a student thought it would be amusing to call me Osama bin Laden's son in an attempt to entertain his friends. Following the tragedy of 9/11, Muslims were often subjected to prejudice and blame for an event we had no connection to. In that moment, I felt not only humiliated, but also deeply unsettled. I began to fear that my faith and background would forever set me apart, that I would always be treated differently because of my culture, color, and beliefs. It took a long time for me to find comfort in who I am and to understand that what that student said was not a reflection of me, but of his ignorance, and probably of the family circumstances he came from. That's my own sidebar. Over time, I learned the importance of self-respect and courage, that speaking up against discrimination is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. Recognizing that I had no reason to feel ashamed of my identity was empowering. Today, I carry that lesson with me. When faced with prejudice, I have the right and the responsibility to stand up for myself and for others. And I think our next testimony is from Imam.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation and to speak about some of the experiences. Number one, being told to go back to your country is a funny thing from someone who's been born here, whose parents were Christians who were born in this country. And one of the experiences that I have after we started congregating in the Bethlehem Township, we had people who came out with some anger, who came out with frustration, who came out with dissension, and they did not want us there. And I remember driving to the mosque at one time, and as I'm driving, someone on a loudspeaker, they yell out, "Go back to your country." I just thought that was so funny. Like, this is my country. Where should I go? Back to the town of Middletown? I mean, where should I go? This is our country. And there are many, many hate and bias incidences. For instance, in the university, we have disparity between the students. We've been working very hard since 2019 to ensure that the students have equal opportunities, that they have equal amenities. So if there are offices for non-Muslims, for Jewish students, for Christian students, we should have the same offices and prayer spaces for the Muslim students. I can report back that I'm grateful to God that, yes, we now have many of those opportunities and those offerings, which we're grateful for. But at the same time, still more needs to be done. More needs to be done. And so binding together is a part of that effort. And really, ultimately, how do we change hate and bias? We change hate and bias by removing hate and bias from the hearts, because our religion teaches us. It teaches us about love. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of us truly believes, this is what our religion teaches us. None of us truly believes until we love for our brother what we love for ourselves. Not hate and bias, not to be against, not to be angry with others. This is the solution. So again, thank you very much. And I also want to thank Senator Patricia Fahey. Also, I've known her since 2018. She's been a stalwart on the corner of the Muslims, helping and assisting us. I first met her on the project with halal foods and halal options. She was there, invited DOC, DOE, many different departments to try and fix the problem of this disparity where we have food options, but we only have options for those who aren't like us. We don't have options that are halal. So I want to thank you as well for your efforts. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
And we have Imam Jamal from Masjid An-Nabawi in Schenectady.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm just going to keep it short. As the Albany Common Council passed a ceasefire resolution last year, we thought it appropriate to replicate that same effort in the city of Schenectady, which obviously has its own respectable Muslim population in terms of size. Throughout probably maybe 10 or 15 different council sessions that we attended as Muslims and non-Muslims, really just as advocates for Gaza and Palestinian lives, the last session actually shocked me, and it shocked a lot of people. Why? Because a sitting council member, publicly elected official, thought it appropriate in a pre-written remark, not something off the cuff that I could understand as somebody who speaks in public quite a bit, but a pre-written remark that called me, and I quote, an emotional terrorist. For what? Because I had been there, along with many others, reminding them that this is something that's important to their own constituency. The residents and the people of Schenectady thought a ceasefire resolution was worth entertaining. Because of this, apparently I'm an emotional terrorist. The word terrorist, specifically that word, chosen by someone to use and to address a Muslim, I mean, 1 + 1 = 2. We all understand where that comes from. So for me, being an American citizen, born and raised here, I saw that as a clear example of bias. That same council member, who I will name and shame, Carmel Patrick, I filed a report with the Attorney General's office, did not hear back. I sent an email to the city council thereafter, including the mayor, did not receive a response. A few months later, in front of my very masjid, a car tried to take someone out. Granted, we understand where we live, right? The city of Schenectady, in the state of New York, in the country of the United States of America. You don't really expect to see things like this. You don't expect to hear things like that from publicly elected officials. Why do I say that? Because as a politician, politics 101, everyone is a potential voter. Everyone is a potential voter, so you have to build bridges, not burn bridges. But this person thought it appropriate to not only burn the bridge, but to laugh while doing so. Because there was an applause that followed from some members that were attending that session, as if there had been some collusion and coordination in that pre-written remark. Who wrote it? God knows best. I'm not going to make any assumptions myself. But I saw what I saw, I heard what I heard, and it was recorded like every city council session is. So imagine the bravado with which one operates to say, I know this is on record, I know this is witnessed by the people in this hall who are not all my friends, but I'm going to say it anyways. I mean, that takes a lot of gall and, you would say, misplaced courage. So the reality is, every one of our elected officials has a responsibility to stand up and speak out on behalf of Muslims, not like myself, because alhamdulillah, I'm born here, but there are a lot of Muslims who aren't, they haven't been born here, and they are afraid to speak out for themselves, as we see. The numbers have been diminishing in our efforts and programs, not because they're not interested, not because they don't support these causes, but because they're actually afraid. And so who needs to stand between them and that fear that they have? Misplaced fear. They don't deserve to be afraid. Our elected officials. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to inspire our elected officials to align their hearts with that which is right and true, and that is the respect for every human being that resides in this country. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you to our speakers. I know if I went down the line, every single one of us could give a story like that, without a doubt. And a lot of this is sourced from the family. I will say that the bias I saw as a child did not stop at elementary school, and it certainly did not get any easier after 9/11. I had friends that made comments that essentially said, "We want you dead," and it's very fresh in my mind. It's still very fresh in my mind. So, just show of hands, how many in the audience has experienced any anti-Muslim bias or hate? Many, many people. Now, how many of you guys reported it? 5, maybe 1, maybe 3%. That's my mental math of looking at it out. Maybe 3% of the folks. So we must gain allies, and we must realize that acceptance is not good for us. You know, just accepting the way these things are, and not expecting our elected officials to speak out when there is something on the news that is front cover, you know, caricature of Mamdani's plane flying into the World Trade Center. Every single one of our elected officials should say that is wrong, because they would do that if it was for any other religion. And that is the point. So, just very quickly, there are QR codes, and we are asking folks to scan the QR code and essentially put in a question. If you have a question for our elected officials, please do so now. We're going to continue with our program with actually the Department of Human Rights representatives Paula O'Brien Soler and Jessica Bain, who have their own presentation, and it's essentially it's like a tutorial. So there is this mic, but you can also, you're more than welcome to come up here if you'd like. The presentation is up here. Yes, and they're going to introduce themselves and give a little bit of a who's who.
Yes, thank you, Hassan. Good afternoon, everyone. As Hassan mentioned, I'm Paula O'Brien Soler. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Legislative and External Affairs at the New York State Division of Human Rights. It's truly an honor to join all of you here today and just experience such powerful testimony about the cruelty of racism and hate and bias. It's just overwhelming. So I want to start by sharing our gratitude to each of you for coming out and for being part of this conversation. And to the Albany Muslim Advocacy Coalition and the United Muslim Alliance of Albany for inviting us to be part of this conversation, and for everything you do for our neighbors in Albany. The Division of Human Rights is a New York State agency that is here to protect the civil rights of every New Yorker. Our work is, okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah, better? Okay. Our work is about making sure that people treat you with dignity and respect. When you are discriminated against, we can investigate what happened and hold people accountable for their actions. Governor Hochul has made historic investments in our agency, and under the leadership of Human Rights Commissioner Denise Miranda, we have dozens of new staff, established important teams. Oh, no, this isn't the slideshow. This is just my remarks, and then and Jesse's gonna give the slideshow. We have 15 minutes, right? Okay. Yeah. Yep, okay. Sorry. I feel like we're in safe spaces, and I really appreciate that. So, you know, we're stronger now than we've ever been at the New York State Division of Human Rights, and it's at a time when our communities need us the most. In addition to our typical complaint investigation process, our Hate and Bias Prevention Unit also collects reports of hate and bias around the state and provides crucial support to impacted communities. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And Jessie Bain, the Assistant Director for the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit, is going to give us a short presentation on how to do that. We know that hate has no place in New York State, but too often Muslim New Yorkers still face, as you bore testimony to, and as a middle school mom, it's so disconcerting, some of those stories. You still face bias, threats, harassment, and hate from people who want to make others feel unwelcome in their own neighborhoods, schools, and workplaces. These acts don't just harm individuals, they harm entire communities, and ultimately they harm all of us because they strike at the values of fairness and equality that define our state. And that's why we're here, to listen, to learn from your experiences, and to share how the Division of Human Rights and our Hate and Bias Prevention Unit can help. So with that, I turn it to Jessie Bain.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you, AMAC and UMAA, for having us here. Assalamu alaikum. And if I want to advance, will you still do it for me? Oh, slide, just up, got it, okay. Yeah, so my name is Jessica Bain, and I'm an assistant director at the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit, which is a unit within the New York State Division of Human Rights. And I want to start with a short personal story just to share that my first work in the field of human rights was after 9/11, working on civil liberties issues and supporting the right to a fair trial and treatment for Guantanamo detainees. That took me on a journey to facilitating dialogue between young adults in the Middle East and the West around faith and political conversations. So it is an honor to be with you today. So I'll share a little bit about the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit. It was started under the direction of Governor Kathy Hochul in 2022. And the goal of this unit is to provide a focus on prevention and community engagement to complement the enforcement of New York State human rights law that the division is responsible for. So we were given a short definition of hate and bias earlier. I think we have a similar definition here. Hate and bias can show up in many ways. We've sorted it into three basic categories. One is discrimination, so that would be a violation of New York State human rights law in housing, healthcare, education, etc. And if you experience discrimination, you can file a complaint with the Division of Human Rights. Another way is through a hate or bias incident. Now this might not rise to the level of a hate crime. In order to have a hate crime, as was explained, you need to have a crime and a hateful motivation behind that crime. But a hate or bias incident can still cause harm and intimidation to communities. So what matters there is really the impact. And our Hate and Bias Prevention Unit is able to engage both around hate and bias incidents as well as hate crimes. So if you want to report an incident to the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit at the Division of Human Rights, that will help to reflect the scope of hate and bias in New York State. If you've experienced a hate crime, you can certainly report to the police, or if communities don't wish to report something to the police, they can also report that to the Division of Human Rights. We can help coordinate with law enforcement as necessary and as desired, and we can also provide other support in the form of resources and connections to community organizations, referrals. So in that way, we can support for all these different kinds of experiences of hate and bias. I know we already shared a definition of hate and bias, and one thing I just want to note is that when we think about bias, we could also think of it in terms of both implicit, maybe unconscious bias that we may all harbor, as well as explicit bias. Now, how do we report hate and bias? There are different ways that you can report. As I mentioned, you could report to the police, to law enforcement, or you can call the Division of Human Rights, 844 No to Hate. That's our statewide hotline. And we have these cards in multiple languages at the table in the back. So what happens if you report to the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit? If you call 844 No to Hate, or you can also submit a report online. We seek to provide a victim-centered and trauma-informed approach. The calls are confidential and multilingual interpretation is available. The first thing we'll do is simply document what is shared. You can report anonymously, but that reporting helps us to reflect for policymakers and for the public the scope of hate and bias in the state, which can help to inform policy responses. We can also provide consultations, referrals, and services, such as to mental health counseling, other government agencies, legal services. We also provide community-focused responses, which can include engagement, conflict resolution, dialogue, or restorative justice. The idea behind these community-focused responses is that they can be an alternative or a complement to law enforcement and the legal system to help support building relationships and addressing the roots of hate and bias. And these responses can be especially helpful in cases where no law was broken, but there was still harm. I want to share some preliminary data from our hotline that was received in the past year. And I should note that this is only what was reported to our hotline. So it does not reflect statewide data that may have been reported to the police as well. And I should also say that it is not a reflection of everything that's happening in the state by any means. It's already been mentioned that underreporting is a concern. I'm gonna just jump to that. So we had 923 contacts with the public, and of 646 hate or bias incidents, we saw that the most common types were harassment, discrimination, or display of hate symbols or statements, and the most common bias motivations reported were anti-disability, anti-sexual orientation or gender identity, or anti-Black or African American. And I'm noting here a very unrepresentative number of reports around anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian, or anti-South Asian incidents. We understand that this number is not reflective of the experiences in this room, and I simply share it to encourage people as they're comfortable to speak up, use their voices, and make them heard. I want to share just a little bit more about the resources we provide if you were to call our hotline. We have a website with publicly available resources at nohatenys.org. And in there you can see on here, you can filter by a type of service, if you're looking for legal services, for instance, if you're looking for services in a particular region, or services to support a particular population, whether it's Muslim community, or LGBTQ community, or Black community, or Jewish community, etc. And here's our contact information. In case you would like to reach out, you're welcome to go by any of these contacts. Now, if you're not sure, well, is what I experienced a hate crime? Is it discrimination? Is it a bias incident? You don't need to make that determination. That's something that we can help you figure out. So if you call 844 No to Hate, then we can help direct your call to the appropriate place.
for a second because Jesse shared those slides with us a couple days ago, and I think all of us in this room should be so appalled by those statistics. The fact that statewide anti-Muslim incidents reported make up less than 1% is horrifying. The fact that we had one incident from all of Capital Region, we just listed like 7 here right now, right? And so, yes, there's systemic ignorance of our community. Yes, there still continues to be a lack of systemic support there for us, but if we are not speaking our truth, how will our electeds know that we need these supports? So I really hope that you take away from this a profound sense of obligation and responsibility to report anything that happens to you and leave it to the experts to determine if it is hate or bias.
Thank you. I'll just buttress at the back table. There's cards and some promo items marked with the division's information. So if you grab a chopstick or hand sanitizer, it will remind you to report. So if you don't report, we can't support. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to hold questions till the end. And there is also the QR code. I encourage folks, if you have questions, please submit them through the QR code. They are posted on the pillars, and they are also on, yes. Okay, give me 2 moments. I think one of the documents, no, here it is. Okay. So thank you to Paula and Jessica for their presentation. I'm gonna hand this one back off and use this one. All right, so I know for a fact that the stats are low, and admittedly, we would want them to be low, but not falsely low. So thank you guys so much for the information, and I would encourage and expect everybody to grab some of those materials in the back so that they're well informed. So we're going to move on to the portion where we have some feedback from our elected officials and an intro from our elected officials. We also will have questions that are going to be asked of our elected officials. So while those are getting put together, I'm going to hand the mic to Senator Fahey to give an introduction, or you can go if you'd like.
Good afternoon again. Pat Fahey, nice to be here. Thank you for all the kind words and the welcoming remarks. And it's also good to see so many familiar faces and happy to continue to be as much of a resource as I can be. I live in Albany, for some of you that don't know me. I had been in the Assembly prior to Gabriela Romero being elected last year when I ran for earlier this year, I should say. I was sworn into the Senate, replacing Neil Breslin. My district is now much larger. It's most of Albany County, not Colony and not like the river cities like Cohoes and others, but most of the rest of it. Most of Schenectady County, not the city of Schenectady nor Niskayuna. I think there was a strategic effort to take out the blue parts, if you will, and keep it a more conservative seat. And then I have all of Montgomery County, which technically is not even the capital region, but you often hear me refer to the capital region just because it's simpler. That's a very different district than what Senator Breslin had for 26 of his 28 years, but very proud represented and very hopefully represent a number of you in that district. I want to say today, I just was trying to take some notes as you were talking, and I want you to know I'll continue to be a resource. It's clear there's a lot of pain, hurt, and even fear at times. And I think we've, there is almost a culture of fear that is being embedded in, nationally, if not internationally. And I do believe some of it starts at the top. I'm not trying to be immediately political here, but I've studied leadership organizations, and I've studied a lot about leadership, and I think the culture at the top with the Trump administration, so much of this has gotten much, much worse. Some of it is COVID related, where you even see road rage, office rage, just school rage. Some of it you can tie to COVID, some of it you can tie to the growth of social media and the fact that we are all stay in our own bubbles and don't break out of those bubbles, and the algorithms with social media reinforce that. So there's a lot of reasons, but I do think it has gone to an all-time new high. Bias, hate, disrespect, intolerance, you name it, is really, we're seeing every norm being broken at the national level. And so I can't help but say, yes, it may have started earlier, or it may have always been there to some degree, but certainly I know I've never used the word cruelty much. It's just not a word I use often, and I find this year I use it practically every day in reference to something. So there is a level of cruelty that is underway on many levels, in many ways, and something that just seems to be so pervasive. Another just comment that I want to make that I do think is something that is just very troubling, and it's a word my sister gave me, I'll be honest, and it just seems to be across our society these days, is that we are othering. It's we are othering individuals, othering them, whether it's an immigration-related issue, othering them, whether it's some type of bias or discrimination, but it is an othering. And again, you see some of this done at the national level, and it's a word that really stays with me as you read about so much of what is going on, particularly with regard to ICE raids, and the fact that the courts, to some degree, have ruled that individuals can be stopped based on the way they look, speak, or their any form of ethnicity, their color, the color of their skin. So it's just again, it is an othering, and some of it is being condoned at the highest levels. I will say just a little bit about me. I'm from Chicago, so I tend to follow a lot of what's been going on in Chicago lately, given that's become a little bit of the epicenter of some of the ICE raids and more. So I'm very sorry if I'm conflating some issues here, but they do tie in for me, given all that is going on there. And I think it is something that I try to use my voice in the state Senate to call out as much as possible. And I try, in the way I approach matters, to lead with compassion and start with compassion. Sometimes with women, and I'm not trying to get into gender issues here, but sometimes that's taken as being too nice or dismissive, or as a doormat. I assure you I'm not a doormat, but I do try to monitor my words or watch my words, but also speak out and try to use myself as an example to model civil and decent behavior. Aside from saying I'm from Chicago, I will just add, because some of you do not know me, and I find I say this a lot this year, I am the daughter of immigrants, and I often, and I say this all the time as well, I often think some of the divide in this country is because all of us are, or so many of us are, forgetting our history. And we're a nation of immigrants, some who were forced, not willingly came here as immigrants, right? If you think of the horrific history of the slave trade. So it is something that I realize that the older I get, the fact that my parents came here for the same universal goals that most immigrants come here for, and that is the chance at a decent wage, which they were not able to get. They were Depression-era children. And the chance that their children would have a chance at an education that they were not afforded. Neither of my parents went beyond elementary school. And so I'm a living example of some of the positive things and the wonderful things that this country has to offer. And I will say I also, I served on the Albany School Board many, many years before Hassan served on it. But when I moved here, I made a point of, I chose to live in Albany. At that point, my now husband was living in the suburbs, and I said, well, no, I want to live in the largest city. And I chose to send my children to the Albany schools. We were in a fortunate position where we could have afforded anything. But I chose to send them there because it was important to me that they not forget who they are and where they come from. And I wanted them to understand the best of this country is its diversity, and it is what this country is founded on. So I try to lead with that, and I'm very outspoken these days on, I do believe diversity is the strength of this nation, and so I think we need to, aside from talking about the need to report, the need to call it out, the need to address things, I also believe we need to embrace the diversity, and we need to focus, we need to flip as much as possible into the positive. And I once heard a school superintendent, wasn't the Albany school superintendent, it was another superintendent I was on a panel with a couple of decades ago. And she said, a child cannot be bullied if they're resilient. So if we teach resiliency as well, and so much of this comes down to bullying, right? A form of bullying, whether it's on social media, whether it's a number of the incidences that were mentioned. And so I think of that as well, like how much did I teach my children to be resilient? How much do I practice resiliency given the negativity? You know, any position I take, it's open season to some degree on elected officials. But I want to note that, and I loved the comments about teaching about love. I forget, yes, the teaching about love. That is just so important that we, again, live by example and go back to that and teach that resiliency. So I think that's more than you wanted. I just wanted to throw out a couple of things, and happy to take some of the questions. I don't have all the answers, but I do try to present myself and try to be as welcoming to all, and use my voice to as much as possible. And I've been very aggressive in doing that this year in particular, in light of what I believe are some horrific national policies on the part of the Trump administration, and war in general, and certainly the mass starvation and other issues in the Middle East. So thank you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Gabriela Romero, just give me 2 seconds. Does anybody have other questions that they could bring to me? Just written? If not, we will. We will. Assemblywoman Gabriela is going to give her intro, and
Sure.
Then we're going to get into the questions.
I'm going to stay right here and give my quick intro. So my name is Gabriela Romero. I was just elected to the New York State Assembly for the 109th Assembly District. I represent Albany, all of Albany, pretty much all of Guilderland, and all of New Scotland. Before I was in the New York State Assembly, I was an attorney in the Albany County Public Defender's Office. I loved that job. I was a trial attorney, but also a mitigation attorney, making sure that I was giving voice, power, and resources to the most vulnerable. And before I was in the Assembly, I considered that my life's work, and I truly loved that. Before I was in the Assembly, I was in the Common Council, focusing on tenants' rights and public safety. And yes, one of my proudest and possibly most challenging achievements was also passing, and I want to be very clear, Councilmember Adams, he was the lead sponsor of that, but I admittedly also was really involved in the coalition to pass the first ceasefire resolution in New York State, which was very challenging. But Councilmember Adams, as the lead sponsor, took a lot of that intensity, but to be honest, it was the coalition, frankly, kind of the first row of people here, that was a really helpful part of not only educating us at that time, but bringing us into the fold when we were attacked and being educated at the same time is something that's very scary as a politician. And so to have this amazing group of people in the first row that were like, you're doing the right thing, let's do it, this is everything. I'm really appreciative to everyone there that was there at that time. Thank you so much for the, hi Serena. Thank you so much to all of the work that you guys did for putting this on. I just want to shout you guys out. So you said thank you to me. I wanted to make sure that you also had your appreciation because you did a lot of work at that time too. Since being in the Assembly, I've been really focusing a lot about immigration-related rights and the constituent-related services, similar to Senator Fahey, especially in upstate New York. We've been dealing with a lot of very intense ICE raids, not only in the city of Albany. And I think that, I think it's unique in upstate New York to have representatives that are just so in front and very vocal about ICE. I was just at a caucus retreat where people were like, wow, you and Senator Fahey are doing that, which is, mostly New York City is in front of it, so I'm proud of us for the work we've been doing on that. But I've also been working on bills, whether it's partnering with the AG's office to pass in both houses the most recent civil litigation omnibus bill, or giving money or working with local organizations to do Know Your Rights presentations, or there was a most recent bill that I introduced hoping to pass at next session that would give us a state cause of action in local court to sue bad federal actors like ICE when they're violating our federal constitutional rights. And the reason that a bill like that is important is because a state court is much more accessible than a federal court when your federal constitutional rights are being violated. And you need to get immediate and quick access to a state court when your constitutional rights are being violated. So as a lawyer, that's the type of things that I'm thinking of to make sure that all of your rights are able to be more quickly and accessibly available to you. So I just want to kind of end that I'm here to listen and learn, and I acknowledge that I am constantly learning and constantly open to not only being wrong, but being educated. And so I appreciate you guys even having this event and having me here to listen and learn from all of you. So I'm not only appreciative of that, but I want to also acknowledge that I'm really appalled by the experiences that you've shared, and I hope to kind of keep some of these people accountable that have even been named, hoping to follow up on some of that. So, thank you.
So thank you both for your comments and your support of our community. Senator Fahey was on the school board years before I was, and it's a stepping stone, as you can see. You went from the school board to the assembly to now you're in the Senate, and maybe one day a little bit further. So, and one of the things that we want to impress here is that we are united as a community against this, and we are seeking allies. And we want those allies to create more allies. We want them to come to our defense because it is not always easy to be the one that stands up for yourself constantly. So That being said, we have a number of questions. I definitely don't think we're going to get to all of them. However, I'm going to try to prioritize some that are relevant and I think kind of touch on multiple of the questions. So the first, the first aspect of this is, there's a lot of mistrust between, the U.S. government right now and the Muslim community. All you have to do is look at Trump's tweets for, the last 7-8 years and see that we have been directly targeted. How and why could this be built with New York State government, particularly with ICE and so essentially, I think the question here is that how can we break that wall down, that barrier down, and how are we, in particular with ICE and, our statuses as immigrants or legal permanent residents, what can the state do to protect us and to, maintain legality of these kinds of actions, of these illegal actions that are constantly happening? There's a little bit of a hard differentiation. There's no question in there, so to speak, but I guess it's more of a, with all that's going on, there's a mistrust, and how are we going to fix that mistrust? And we're low on time, so if anybody up here would like to comment on that like a minute or two, please do.
I'm standing because otherwise I can't be seen. I want to make sure others can see me. I don't have any good answers here, but I'm just going to very briefly say, every day I honestly wake up thinking, I sleep at night and I wake up in the morning thinking, how can I call this out? What can I do? How do you stand up for others? I'm honestly horrified and sickened over what is going on, and I do believe we are going backwards. And as I mentioned, I really believe we are forgetting our history and who we are as a nation in so many ways. So for me, I try to use my voice as much as possible. I use social media. Many people in a protest got off Twitter. I stay on Twitter, or X as I refuse to call it. But just because that's where the media pays attention, the media tends to follow that. I'm not as good on Instagram, but my office helps me on that more. Facebook, I do some. I get help, obviously, in my office. But I do use social media sometimes to call out the positive, sometimes to call out the negative. I do watch tone. I try to, I don't do snark. It's just a long-time philosophy of mine. I work very hard not to do snark. I try to use words to call things out, not try to get into the gutter with others, or certainly Donald Trump. The other thing, I think so much of what you started the whole meeting about, is that both organizations, UMAA and the Advocacy Coalition, the Muslim Advocacy Coalition right here, was founded a couple of years ago, right after, the horrors of October 7th, and the horrors in the aftermath since. So I think organizing, and I often tell people, even when we're doing a press event, and we do a lot of them in my office, and I often say, who are the not so usual suspects to align with? So my favorite example is, many of you know, I like walkable communities. I support and promote a lot of walkable communities, so it's not the best example, but it's just one that's one I use often. When we were doing something about trails, sidewalks, safer pedestrian crossings, instead of just calling out the bike community, we made sure at the press event we had the AARP and the Heart Association and others that were, so health, elderly, just other coalitions. And, we talk about bullying. That's also a huge issue in the mental health community and with suicide prevention. It's a suicide, we are going backwards on suicide since, especially again since COVID. So those are just a couple of examples of broadening coalitions. Healthcare, whatever related issues can be tied into, I think is very important. I've gone beyond 2 minutes here. Sorry, but I think the organizing and using your voices, using social media, writing those letters to the editor, whether you get published or not, when you have letters to the editor going in, it tells the Times Union, oh, this was a good story, or we missed the mark here. So they may not publish your letter, but they're like, wow, we just got 5 letters on such and such. We misstated something, or or it offers an opportunity. I mean, I don't know when you were advocating if you asked to meet with the editorial boards. You are a coalition meeting with editorial boards. So sorry, those are some examples, and certainly I think no advocacy is ever wasted.
I think the question was, how do you create trust with the federal government? Was that?
Well, it's the U.S. government.
Yeah.
The U.S. government.
So,
all levels of government.
So I think, and I'll stand again because you're right. I want people to see me. So I don't know if we're going to create trust with the Trump administration, and frankly, I don't know if I hear what you're asking, and I understand the intent of the question, but I think what you might be asking is more, how can we create trust within governmental systems so that we can, and I'm going to take that and run with it, which is, how can we create trust within governmental systems like DHR, like the police department, so that we feel comfortable reporting incidents of anti-Muslim hate, so that we can trust the people that are supposed to protect us again. Because frankly, the Trump administration is not, that's right, ship has sailed there. And so if that's the question, it's experiences like this, it's sharing that the DHR is a legitimate and really helpful ally in this space. It's that when you report an incident of anti-Muslim hate, that it will be handled by a legitimate agency and that these people will be following up with you. And I think it was mentioned, but I just wanted to really clarify that the governor just changed the way that they handle these cases, and that you don't need an attorney when you report these incidents of harassment or bias, that it'll be, they totally changed it recently. This used to be, if someone reported something like last year and they had a different situation, this year is a totally different situation now because they just changed it. Yeah, cool, okay, good. And so making sure that you share that these are trusted allies in this situation. That is how we make sure that our governmental systems are trusted again. And then, I mean, maybe the police department's a whole nother, it changes municipality to municipality depending on the system and the anti-Muslim hate that could be experiencing there. And I would say, in that specific situation, you have to keep your governmental systems accountable. And the way you do that is through continued communication. It's through advocacy groups like the ones here. And it's through making sure that there's continued pressure. And I mean that as an elected official myself. That when there's continued pressure and continued communication, there is continued accountability.
Thank you. So on that, actually, you guys both mentioned 2 things that are really insightful. So essentially you said alliances or making friends, or what was the term? Yes, exactly. What was the alliances, right? Just essentially coalitions. Thank you. So building coalitions, and then you mentioned pedestrian coalitions, which are not far-fetched, to be honest, because I go to the Albany Masjid. It's on Central Avenue. They just invested millions of dollars into making it beautiful, and it really is. But we have no crosswalk in the middle of Central Avenue, and you have people running back and forth, potentially getting, hit, which you would not think that was a, place to look, but there are groups in Albany, like Walkable Albany or Capitol Streets, that we should reach out to and say, hey, you guys do this way better than we do this, and this is something that we need. And that's how we can start the conversation. So, and Assemblywoman Romero basically said that we need to keep up communication. So rolling into that, Imam Jamal told us a story from Schenectady that he reported and he got no response. So what the Assemblywoman said was keep messaging, keep communicating, keep connecting. If you have a question, please write it down on a note card. There's a gentleman up there with the, and that is true in every aspect of government that I've actually ever been in. I've worked for the Department of Transportation, I've been at the Thruway, I've worked at the Senate, and essentially the squeaky wheel gets the grease regardless of how troubling the situation is. So I know it is not ideal, but we must persevere and continue to communicate with our elected officials and our representatives. One of the commenters is asking about there's a big problem with the news media and how it's normalizing hate groups and hate against Muslims. And it's more of a comment, but we all need to, in my opinion, we all need to be a little bit more vocal and essentially seen. So how are we seen? It's by showing up every day like we do and running our stores, running our businesses, reaching out to people who we don't normally reach out to, and creating those friendships and those understandings where, like I said at the beginning, as people get more educated, they like Muslims more. So we must do the education element to whatever extent we can. We also count on our elected officials to do some of that educating because it's big work and you guys have big audiences. So moving to another, I'm gonna spitfire 4 essentially because we're really low on time. I'm gonna spitfire 4, and they're going to be essentially in the same vein, and then we can have a just brief chat. Okay, so first one being, hate and bias incidents against Muslims often go underreported because of fear, mistrust, or they do not believe it matters to their representatives. What will you do to make reporting more acceptable for more marginalized communities? Next question. Some faith communities have successfully secured additional state or federal safety funding in recent years. What steps can you take to ensure Muslim and Arab communities in Albany have equal access to those same protections for their houses of worship and Islamic schools? Third, would you support legislation that explicitly condemns Islamophobia, anti-Muslim sentiment, and commit to tracking and preventing anti-Muslim hate incidents, similar to efforts addressing anti-Semitism and other bias? 4, will you commit to ensuring that law enforcement officers and public employees receive regular, community-informed anti-bias training developed in partnership with Muslims and Arab organizations? So I can certainly repeat them again. Yeah. The first one was hate and bias incidents against Muslims often go underreported because of fear, mistrust, or they just do not believe it matters to their representatives. What will you do to make reporting more acceptable for marginalized communities? And this is open to the entire floor, so. And sit, stand, do whatever you prefer.
I guess everyone's standing. So one of the things that we will do is continue reaching out to communities like we are here right now to grow awareness of the options to report and the benefits of reporting. And when people report, we try to take a trauma-informed and victim-centered approach so that we let the caller guide us. What are you looking for? What would be helpful? We can present some options, but we want to meet the need where it is. And we also have a network of regional councils made up of faith and community leaders. We have Mac Jamil here with us today. And one of the reasons we have this network of community partners is so that our responses are grounded in the community and we're working in coordination with people who know what the needs are in that community. And another piece, of course, is we offer confidential reporting so that we don't pressure anyone to give us any more information than they feel comfortable giving us.
Thank you. For 2 and 3, and then I'll if you want to touch on this. So for number 2, I think it was a funding question. Even as myself, as I'm learning more about state grants and stuff, I saw that not to put you on blast, but I saw that the governor's representative is here, which is, snaps and claps to him. But yeah, we can clap. Yeah, I just want to shout out the governor as well. Thank you for coming. But yes, if the question required a yes, of course, I would advocate. But I think the question was more about like accessibility and like how does one navigate?
What steps can you take to ensure Muslim and Arab communities in Albany have equal access to those same protections for their houses of worship in Islamic schools? So, for example, I go to the mosque in Albany, and we do most of that on our own. So, the security and the management of the flow of people in and out. And I don't often see police just there for the half an hour to make sure that there's no one who has bad intentions coming.
I understand. It might not even be a money question then. So I'm happy to like sit down with leaders, faith-based leaders, to talk about what that could look like, what the needs are. And sometimes it's a matter of sitting down and saying, what are your needs? What do you need? And working with you. Is it a money question? I actually just jumped the gun, assuming that this was a money question. This might not be a money question. This could just be sitting down with you and talking about what is actually needed, and I'm happy to just work with you on that. Sometimes it's a matter of like state police navigating like a route with the state police to assume or dictate some type of additional security, or it's working with you to figure out a private security plan, or it's like, there's a myriad of different options there. Happy to work with you. If it's financial, it's working with my own staff and yours to coordinate the grant opportunities, potential governor staff to work with faith-based grant opportunities. There's a security grant that's available for faith-based security grant opportunities. All of the above, happy to assist and help with. Number 3 was a clear yes. When that was, will you support a legislative thing? Yes, and I think, yeah, that's a clear yes. And then for 4, I think Senator Fahey actually spoke to the chief of police in Albany about this one. I'll pass it to Pat for that.
Thank you. Very briefly, because I want to be sensitive to, you have a lot of questions. Just agree on all that was mentioned. The funding was initially, there was state funding initially passed a few years ago when we saw a rise of incidences, in this case anti-Semitic ones, and some serious violence. There was a $25 million pot. I think that was re-upped again to $25 million. But that has gone to mosques. That my understanding is that goes to any communities that have experienced violent threats. The JCC in Albany, I think, I'm almost positive, received a small grant under that to upgrade their security, given that they have received a number of bomb threats. But I do not believe that is exclusive to anti-Semitic. I'm quite positive mosques and others have received that funding. The vast majority of these funds, keep in mind, go down toward New York City, where there is a much bigger concentration of many ethnic groups that have experienced this. So, but we can check. The bottom line is the funding is accessible, And I didn't know about the governor's rep, so happy to meet you as well, and look forward to communicating. And I should also note, I saw David Gallen, the mayor's chief of staff, is also here too, so could be another resource. Thank you, David. In terms of tracking, yes, trying to encourage folks. We have, this is only the city of Albany. Certainly it doesn't go as further beyond that. But we have an incredibly accessible acting police chief, Brendan Cox. I texted him one of the questions this morning when we saw it, and he immediately responded to say, I'm happy to meet with any group. They obviously, as part of their academy training for any new officers, they do have bias training. We see this, this has become a big issue in the disabilities community, as well as in many other communities, such as recognizing autism, things of that nature. So there's a lot of bias training of police officers. But some of this is just introductions, and I'm happy with the Assemblywoman to facilitate any of those conversations or just refer you. He's very accessible. I would say do the same for the sheriffs, because then you get Albany County or Schenectady County or Montgomery County, wherever the case may be. And then, there was one other. I think I think I lost track of the questions, but hope that addresses some of those. Thank you. Again, we can never be vigilant enough. And the DA's office, that's an excellent point. Yes, the district attorney's office, we have a new district attorney in Albany who's been, not that the previous one wasn't, but the new district attorney, whose name is suddenly, Lee Kinlan, suddenly just did a brain freeze there, has been very outspoken on a number of issues too. Thank you for noting that.
So we have two more questions. We're gonna push it just a little bit further because we started a little late. So, and this really gets to the heart of media questions and kind of responsibility for statements that people take, and how what's the best way to approach that in a way that is productive and essentially resolves an issue or frankly call someone out. So let's just go to January 2024. During the contentious ceasefire resolutions process in Albany, a sitting councilwoman made incredibly incendiary remarks in the newsletter sent to all constituents. In it, she noted that Muslims only care about issues when the oppressors are Jewish, implying that efforts for a ceasefire resolution were derived from innate racism, as though Muslims couldn't possibly care about human rights as a baseline. Can you repeat that? Yep. In January of 2024, during the contentious ceasefire resolution process in Albany, a sitting councilwoman made incredibly incendiary remarks in the newsletter sent to all constituents. In it, she noted that Muslims only care about issues when the oppressors are Jews, implying that efforts for a ceasefire resolution were derived from innate racism, as though Muslims couldn't possibly care about human rights as a baseline. What is your take on how such clear ethical violations should be handled, and how do you hold your colleagues accountable for such discriminatory behavior? And when we say colleagues, this is a specific incident where you might have been the colleague at the time, probably. And how do we handle that kind of thing? There's other things like Canary Mission, for example, that have all kinds of names that people, if I speak up against the genocide happening in Palestine today, I could end up getting put on that. And then I could end up getting, doxxed. I mean, that's the bottom line. And it is a very real fear of this community. One of the reasons why you probably saw only one person reported it, hate crimes, is because in situations where we speak up, we often get shoved back down or put into positions that are really unfavorable for us. So if anybody if anybody has any comments about this.
Yeah, well, I don't even remember that happening at the time, but that is disappointing. There are a few different ways to handle that. And I'm from speaking from experience in the assembly when colleagues say things that are wrong and I'm not using the right word, you know, hateful, bigoted, damaging, racist, you know, extremely hurtful. And I'm classifying it as negative and just negative comments in the assembly, that if it's in real time during debate, you call them out. If in the assembly, at least, we don't have that same ability to call people out like in a newsletter. You know, like it's not, if someone was to write something in their newsletter in the New York State Assembly, we don't have that same ability to be like, you know, Senator Fahey said something in her newsletter, so I'm gonna like say something. And so I'm digesting in real time. I think that it's different, the level of accountability, though, on a local level. So putting myself back in the city council, there's a personal where you say, listen, that was like kind of crazy what you did. And then there's a larger, more public opportunity to say, this happened and this hurt a community. And I think that the question one has to ask themselves is it the politician or is it the community group that is the person? This is an existential question. I should stand, sorry. Is it the politician or the community group that is the person to call out this this entity, or the person that said the hateful comment? And I think that that is a decision that should be made both by the person and the community group together. You know, like if that, I'm sure if you came to me and said, Gabriella, like this council member said this, we would strategize on how to go about, because at that time we were in lockstep group chat. I don't even remember. That's crazy. Okay. It sounds like she issued a new newsletter. Okay. Great. So, wow, what a wild time that was in my brain. So I think like it sounds like we handled that appropriately, which was in the group chat, we discussed and said, what should we do? The coalition decided it together. But I think like there are other moments that you might not have a coalition behind you and you have to decide for yourself as a politician, what do I do? And kind of going back to my earlier point, that's why it's so important to have those close relationships with people where you're able to say like, oh, what's going on here? And what should happen? And that's on my end. While it's also important to have the coalition that's like, this is happening, you should be doing this. And I think that that's like a double-edged, dual communicative, helpful relationship to not only like keep people accountable, but also have something to, what's the right word? Trust fall yourself into a group to say, you know, this is, I know I'm doing the right thing, it's a safe space. Does that kind of answer it a little bit? I'm riffing, but.
I think, like Senator Fahey said, we don't have all the answers.
Right.
We don't have all the answers. And a part of being a part of a community is being a little uncomfortable. It is being, you know, hey, this is something that happened. We've been holding it back for a year and it's hurt. It's clearly on someone's mind. And it's outside of us bringing these matters to you, we want to educate ourselves. and remember that we have to persevere, and through hardship comes ease. That's what our faith says. Through hardship comes ease. And part of the hardship right now is that, like I mentioned before, we're 1% of the entire population in the country, less than 1%. And we don't have that representation. We don't have that 1% represented in levels of government. We probably have 0.5% if you want to take the folks in Congress. And, you know, there's, I don't think there's any Muslim senators, US senators, but there are some Muslim Congress people. And if you look at our own state, we have 3.5% of the population across the state, nearly 1 million Muslims in New York City, and we have 2 Muslims in office, one in the Assembly with Mamdani, and then one in the Senate with, I forget his name. Charles. 2 in the Assembly, okay, and 1 in the Senate, so I was a little mistaken. There are 2 in the Assembly, but it does not quite amount to 3.5%. Not that we should be asking for 3.5%, we should go beyond, because we do, as Muslims, we do have genuine care for all people. It does not matter what your religion is, what your skin color is, what your belief is. We believe in a baseline of humanity, and that is why we are outspoken on so many of the issues that are really appalling happening across the world right now. A little bit more facts to just kind of put this into perspective, that Brookings, the Brookings Institute in 2024 said that 54% of Republicans have an unfavorable view of Muslims, and 67% of Republicans have an unfavorable view of Islam. And that is the kind of environment we are all living in, that essentially, potentially 1/4 of the people you meet every day, I mean, the numbers were better for Democrats, but not where they really should be, but guaranteed 1/4 of the people you meet every day do not like you. And whether they show that outwardly or keep it inward, that is going to affect your trajectory. And we cannot be silent about it, and that's why we are here. So I do think that kind of wraps up our evening, because we've already gone over 15. I was doing my best to keep it on time. Yep.
Email them. Oh, I talk loud enough, guys. We can email them over to you guys, and if you get some remarks to us, we can publish it in a newsletter or something along those lines, if that's fair. I know even 4 hours wouldn't have been enough. This was, I think, very cathartic for our community, so appreciate you guys being here, and we hope that this is one of many ongoing sessions, because trust is not built in a 2-hour afternoon session. So this is kind of the prelude, and we hope to do this over and over again.
Yeah, I just realized I hadn't mentioned this earlier. Maybe it was mentioned before I got here. John McDonald, our assembly colleague, was supposed to be here as well, and because this date was picked quite a while ago. He had a funeral to attend in Syracuse, so had to cancel last night.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I just that would bear. Yeah, and again, we're happy to keep talking and happy to be accessible and yeah, whatever it takes. I think, as you said, and it goes beyond us. Again, it is organizing, it is coalition building, it is reaching out to other communities. A lot has been done in my tenure, in my 13th year in the Assembly, now Senate, and the Asian American community. It's just it's unbelievable how much they've been put on the map on a host of issues. There's a lot of crossover there. And I know there's a lot of involvement among the Muslim community as well with the Asian American community, and that's one I really encourage involvement with too, because they've gotten tremendous funding and more.
On the reporting. So Like Jessica mentioned, there are regional councils. There are 8 regional councils for the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit across New York State. The Capital Region has one. And I am a representative on that council on behalf of the Muslim Community Center. So again, I hope you walk away with this feeling empowered to report any hate or bias that you experience. If you are uncomfortable doing so, find any member of AMAC, find any member of UMAA, find me. We are happy to report on your behalf. We're happy to help you walk through the reporting. We have to start reporting, and there are resources available. We have to start availing ourselves of those resources. I think there were several more questions around how to report or what is done with the data, so I'm gonna sign Jesse and Paula up for just floating around for the next 15-20 minutes. Of course, there's some sensitivity around information that we are submitting to government systems, and that's a valid concern, but please don't just make up your mind that reporting is not worth it. Talk to somebody before you make that decision.
Okay, well, closing remarks. First and foremost, thank you to our esteemed politicians and New York State representatives for taking the time to be here to connect with the Muslim community. Jazakallah khair for everyone that is in attendance. Just a few things to note, and I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but for those that are not aware, this morning apparently ICE arrested our brother Sami Hamdi, who we know is a very vocal international proponent and advocate for Palestinian rights, among other things. And what's interesting is less than 24 hours before that, Laura Loomer, who many of you are familiar with, tweeted about the fact that ICE should target Sami Hamdi. And it beautifully dovetails, quote unquote beautifully, into the topic of discussion for today, because Sami Hamdi is essentially being targeted for exercising his rights to free speech and for advocating against bias and hate towards Muslims, towards Palestinians, towards the cause in Gaza, so on and so forth. So I will segue from that to say the numbers that were presented in terms of the statistics around Muslims that are reporting hate and bias in New York are an underrepresentation, a significant underrepresentation. And we all know this because we've all lived it, we've all worked it, especially in a post 9/11 world, in a post Trump world, and then Trump part 2. We need to do a better job of utilizing the resources that are available to us through the New York State Division of Human Rights, using our politicians who make themselves readily available, many of them, 2 of whom are right here, to the Muslim communities. We have to drive this point home. We cannot be disconnected from the political process, from the advocacy process. This is the very reason why organizations such as UMMA and AMAC now exist. So it behooves us, it is our obligation to utilize these resources and to utilize our voice. I want to thank again the politicians and our New York State representatives that came here. Again, continue to please share all of your stories. Al-Hidaya Center continues to welcome our entire community, our politicians, our New York State representatives, and on behalf of Al-Hidaya Center, UMMA, and AMAC, I thank you very much for being here today. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you to our guests. We really appreciate everyone coming. Don't feel like you have to stick around, but I'm sure people might kind of come up and ask you. And there are refreshments, which I desperately need, so I'm going to be down there. So if you need to talk to me, I'll be back there. Thank you to everyone, and I hope this was informative, and we now know what we need to do going forward, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
استووا واعتدلوا يرحمكم الله. الله